All right. So thanks everybody for coming to our presentation on a remedy integration that we have done where I work with a connectivity management tool that is called Patch Manager. I'm here with Joel DeNeuf. Go ahead and go to the next screen. For the connectivity management, that connectivity management tool, it represents the physical layer of what's in your structure. So in other words, we can run discovery and find all our routers and switches and servers, but we don't really have anything representing inside of the CMDB other than information of where it really physically is. Yeah, we have information that says it's in this building, it's in this room. Maybe it's on this floor, if you use the floor field kind of thing with it. But there's nothing visual to see it. And the Patch Manager tool gives you a visual representation of that kind of information. In Remedy, we are tracking all of that device information. And what we've done is an integration using the REST API that was added to Remedy to make a call to the Patch Manager system. Patch Manager has built REST API representations off even their reporting system. So we built a custom report to give us exactly the field data that we wanted in Patch Manager. And then just do a REST API call and say, go pull all this data. And then what happens in Patch Manager is they have that same physical router or switch, a particular Cisco 3650 sitting there. We've named, ABC, and I've discovered ABC. So I take that same information from those two systems and I tie them together so that I can see from my CMDB records what all the device inside of, well, there's two different pieces. One piece is I just want to know that the device is actually represented in Patch Manager and what all ports it may have on it. And then we also track billable circuit. And it's not just billable, we can actually track the non-billable circuit as long as we identify information about that circuit and give that circuit a name. So we have another piece that where we're tracking those billable circuits. AT&T provides a circuit from this center up into the cloud, and then out of the cloud to a different center. I'm giving you clues about where I work and so forth. And we take that information. We have a custom piece that we built to track those billable circuits because we have to pay AT&T for that service. And we then use Patch Manager to say, hey, what is on the ends of this billable circuit? So it'll tell you what devices are on the ends. It'll tell you what ports are used to plug into all of that kind of stuff. Okay.
So is the patch management tool that you're gathering data, is that something you guys wrote, or is that?
No, Patch Manager is what he's going to demo. It's a completely product beside what we do. What we did is an integration to pull this data in.
Okay.
And so I'm not doing a presentation on this trip about what we did for our mid, but we have created a system in between what's discovered and what's property. We have a scenario, we got all these property rules that we have a device that was handed to you. Property wise, it's deployed, but you haven't put it on the network. So from a discovery standpoint, it doesn't exist. But we need to track information about it from a security plan. So it's got to have a security plan tied to it to be allowed to get on the network. So we kind of get some of this information and make it all marry up and tie together. But on top of that, we leverage what's in Patch Manager to give us all this information from what's coming out of the Patch Manager device. You see here, obviously I had to hide names and so forth on that. But you get the template tells us exactly what kind of device it is based on what's in Patch Manager, what room it's in, what rack, what port label, all that kind of stuff on it. Right, next. And this is getting into some of that detail. One of the key pieces for how I track the data coming out of Patch Manager to make sure I don't double things up is a device entity ID. They have a unique ID. So I could pull the data from there constantly and go update it if I, as I pull it over, if it changes in patch manager. Okay. And then this is the billable circuit stuff. So I have a particular billable circuit, the service ID that AT&T is providing, and I can see all the devices that go along that billable circuit. So, because it can go a lot of places.
You use this for troubleshooting as well? So if a circuit goes, or a particular device goes down, you can go back and track it to see if the circuit's down or if the port is down.
So patch manager doesn't have a clue about what's up or down.
Okay.
But yeah, just having the information to see that if I'm having an issue with this circuit, here's all the devices that are impacted, or vice versa, one of these devices could be impacting it. Usually the monitoring tools have already seen exactly what device had an issue if it's one of ours. But sometimes it's AT&T's problem. It's not ours. But we can still see what all it's connected to. Okay. Sorry, I should have repeated the question. The question was, do we use that to troubleshoot when something goes down on everything? So sorry about that.
That's right.
And so this is the more detailed view of an individual record for that we were showing. Okay. And now I'm going to hand it over to Joel, and he is going to demo for you Patch Manager itself, so you can see what a cool system it is. Because you think about all that data, try thinking of managing all that data manually in the Rimby form that I had. And now see what he's going to show you. All right. Joel, it's over to you.
So I have 50 slides on here that I put in case I couldn't get my computer on. So I'm only going to go about 3 or 4 into it so you guys don't get death by PowerPoint. I'm going to give you a little bit of insight as to who we are, the product as well, because this answers some of your questions. We're a consulting firm, 5 Points. We're based out of Atlanta. We work with Patch Manager, that is the company, as well as that's the name of the product. They've been in business for 20 years. They've been creating this single product for managing connectivity across the physical layer in everywhere around the world. They're based out of the Netherlands. When we talk about Patch Manager, they started just in the offices. They went into data centers and did outside plant. This makes it, from our standpoint, one of the best products we found out in the market. I've been doing this since '98. So with connectivity management products that have existed at different levels across the industry, we worked with them for the last 9 years or so. And you see some of the other things that they have. It has its own built-in reporting engine, which Bob hinted at as well. It's got a workflow management in it that allows you to tie its workflow up to what I call a master ticketing system, either a remedy ticketing system or any of the other ones that are out there as well. And has a really good user access control. They leverage the SSO feature of it. As I saw other people in here that also had CAT cards in their computers as well. So it gives you multi-tenancy as well. So that you can have one organization within it that can see some things and not others, which they're also leveraging in their environment. Patch Manager, it's either running on the cloud or on a server of your own. So makes it easy. Almost every one of our clients puts it in their environments. Security is king. It has 2 interfaces. It has both the client that you'll see today on my machine, as well as an HTML5, lightweight interface. And Bob mentioned as well the REST API. They have a really powerful API tool that's fully extensible to all the data available within the system. So it makes it a really neat way to do the gathering the information, either pulling it out of Patch Manager or pushing it into Patch Manager. And this is the initial view that you see in the system that I built over the weekend. And what I'm going to do now is bring up the Patch Manager system somewhere. Okay.
Joel, did you present just the application? There it is.
Yes. I paused it so it wouldn't be showing me flipping my screens around.
Okay. I just want to be sure.
Yep. So this is the Patch Manager application, and it's built on these 5 windows. The first one over here is where the locations hierarchy is. It's flexible, allows you to go down to wherever you need. You can see that we've got in here. Come here. going across from continents, countries, cities, down to building, floor, data center, even wall plates. Everything is active over here. This is the graphical interface you see. I've got the main overview. If I go down here to another area, I can go down into looking at a small room that might have items in it. It may have graphics, it may not. You'll see one cable here that is going out of that particular room. It's got ways to see little shortcuts on it as well. And I'm going to open up a couple of those. Let's move this window out of the way. Maybe. Nope. And it keeps track of where you were, but I've got a nice cheat for finding a nice elevation. So this allows you to see the graphics in the system, and you can then look at any of the items that you've got. You'll see this one here is a nice simple Cisco device. Front and rear images, shows the power on it as well. This one has DC power. It has all the individual fans. When you look at it, each one is an individual component. So we start tracking IT assets. Usually what you get from the main systems, you get the chassis. You don't get all the components that are in it. So you can get each of the line cards or some of the more advanced items that are in those particular assets can be tracked, because a lot of organizations, they don't care about an SFP. It's $1,000. But if it's a $10,000 item, they're going to put something against it and want to track it. And most systems don't have a full hierarchical ability to handle all those subcomponents. The ports you see on here in blue, that means there's connectivity. And what you can see down below is if I click on one of these, I'll make it really big so you can see it. This is the connection. It's showing where I'm connected here on the face of that switch. It's showing me the switch with some of the user attributes. You'll see they're generically called CMDB because it can be anything. But those are the extensible fields that you can add to the Patch Manager application. So you might take the information from Remedy and put it into Patch Manager with an integration or a hand key, or take the data from Patch Manager, push it in. When we do integrations, typically we get the ID of Remedy in Patch Manager, the ID of Patch Manager Remedy. So you get double checks. You compare names and IDs and go, did they match or not? It then shows the physical connection up to the fiber patch panel. You'll see where it is. It's showing that it's in the same room, et cetera, in the same building. But it's now showing a physical cable going across, and in this case, it's a riser. This is dropping down to the sub-basement into a location, to another patch panel, down to another switch with other information on it. And when you start looking at what you've got from the logical, when you query a system and you look at it from the way most people think about it from a discovery engine, there's what you have. If you've got troubles or problems in between, you don't have any of the breakpoints in there. And we have some of our clients that have 10, 15, 40 breakpoints of fiber that goes across a campus. So you've got all that data in the system that allows you to see where everything is. I'll make sure I stay on track, do all the stuff I want to do. Well, all of this data is magically brought in by Harry Potter. It means that you have to have the data somewhere. And that's the biggest challenge that organizations have is, what data do you have? How are you getting it? How are you gathering it? Organizations can take years to load all the data if they don't have it. We are thrilled when a company says they have all the data, it's in spreadsheets. It's usually about 75 or 80% accurate. They still have to go out and audit. Once,
it wasn't even that close with allowance. We had it all in spreadsheets, but we were what, about 10% accurate?
Well, the challenge is you say it's 75% accurate, but you got 3 cables. Well, if you start adding cables up and you've got 3 out of every 4 of those are right, all of a sudden you've started to get where you've got no full traces that are actually correct. So you want to get all the data in here. This is a multi-user environment. You can have dozens or hundreds of users accessing the system or pulling the data out of the system. So that allows everybody to update it. And you can actually reserve information on there with the work order system to prevent people from using ports that they're not supposed to be using.
But I take it that this kind of a thing, though, is the smart router or whatever device it is, that it's telling you, I have this many connections.
This one is actually hand keyed because it's showing where you've added the patch cords to it. This is where you would do an integration with maybe another system that would start comparing the ports to the ports in Patch Manager. We have another client that does it with Cisco Prime. They query every night, every single port in their entire environment and compare them against Patch Manager and then say what's right, what's wrong, and who's got to go out and figure out who did work they forgot to tell anybody about. Because that way you have a way to take a documentation tool and actually make sure it's compared against the live data. One of the data center managers I worked with basically said he had a 4-foot stick to chase down his engineers when the diff report came out every morning. It's the way it had to operate. Do it or do it. So that gives you an idea what the data looks like in it. But when you start looking at the reports and other items, and I'll go back down here to this field, you can see down here, this is the information I was talking about that is, in this case, tied to your CMDB. And these are all set up as read-only fields. You can't edit them in Patch Manager because they're set up in this system as a true integration where it's being pushed into the system and nobody can politely put screw in it.
So it only gets updated from the CMDB.
Correct. And because the API allows you to update either into Patch Manager or pull the data out, it depends on how the integration works. We don't have a single client that does it the same way. Everybody has different rules, different things they want to have in place as to how they're going to operate their systems. Where is the golden key or true data that you've got that you really rely on? Sometimes in the CMDB, sometimes in this system, sometimes in something else. It really is a matter of who's the slave and who's the owner of that data. And the reports, these are all configurable in Patch Manager, and you'll see here that I've taken it all out and it's giving me that information that Bob showed as well. And if I kick this out to a nice CSV file, speed of Excel. Well, it's going to take it to numbers today. The joys of a new system. But you'll see all the columns of data, and here are all the data fields that report that can be pulled from the API can grab all of these extended fields that you've got in the system as well. Uh-oh, wrong one.
Can you create a hyperlink?
Repeat.
Like storing that hyperlink within asset. Oh, here, there's a link. I can go directly to Patch Manager to that specific device.
Okay, and the question was, can you put a hyperlink in a remedy to pull the data out of Patch Manager? And the answer is yes. That's where you would leverage the HTML5 interface to be able to pull the data. You can't jump directly into the client because of security rights, but you could pull via the HTML5 where you can write your own interfaces into the system.
And for our system, we are only using the client piece, not the full HTML5. There were certain parts of the HTML5 that wasn't quite as robust as the client. And our users are down in that deep part that needed all the robust every time. So we did not build that integration over at this time. Once the HTML5 has everything in it and we move all our users to that, then we will build those same integrations.
Yeah. We have a couple of clients that have built their own interface to match previous systems where it's fully web-based and they tie all the data. I'm going to show you some of the things you can pull out using the HTML5 so you'll then understand how you can essentially build your own web interface to what you need to have in the system.
Are you writing those interfaces directly, or is there a functionality within Remedy that allows you to go grab it like we used to have SOAP-based things?
So today, Remedy now includes REST API as an option on a filter. And I built that integration to call that report in Patch Manager. We have to set up a username password combination. That's the way we chose to do it. And we go over with the REST call. And I will say, LJ over here assisted me in figuring out how to properly fill that out and make it work. And his assistants helped me get there.
Yeah, he kind of does that.
He was good.
He's pretty good at that.
He's pretty good at that.
Yeah, but any data you pull out of the API, it's either going to be graphics or JSON. You can also pull CSV, etc. When you're developing in here, you actually you'll see a JSON button over here and up here, so you can actually see the reports live in the GUI without even having to go and go into an application to pull it out and look at it. You can actually play with the JSON before you get into the coding, which makes life a whole lot easier.
Now, the integration that you did with Bob over at
That other company.
whatever company he works at, is Patch Manager pushing the data into Remedy, or is Remedy pushing the data into Patch Manager?
So for the two integrations you saw up there, I'm doing both. One of them, we're running my guy that maintains the Patch Manager system. He is a good Java developer. And so he built Java to grab that information out of Patch Manager. And so the integration we're dealing with all the circuits, he takes that information and parses it out to give me the records the way I need it. Because when you put information on about the billable circuit, that billable circuit may actually, one wire may be having 500 circuits running through it. And so I needed him to do that way, to parse out the data and give me a record per piece of circuit that's going down that same line. So from that perspective, it was a Java-based piece pulling Patch Manager data and then massaging it and pushing it into the
That's being pushed into Remedy via REST.
So the other one that I had, which was just simply, do I have a device? You know, give me all the devices and information about that device. It wasn't about the circuits. That I did is the straight REST call from Remedy to Patch Manager to go get it. So technically we're using both. Yeah, I'm doing that one as a pull, the other one is a push into Remedy.
And a lot of other clients, they actually have an intermediate program or system that will be able to pull and push from wherever, and then they control that from a security standpoint, as opposed to having either one of the end applications access it directly. It also allows you to see the traffic. It allows you to then make sure what's going sideways when it doesn't work, because you know then from its central system which one is failing out and which one is still gathering data. With the Patch Manager API, you can use the security rights of the user type accounts. So you can set up an API account that all it can do is query data. It can't change anything in Patch Manager. Or you can set it up that it actually write data to Patch Manager. So you can set up multiple API accounts, service accounts, to go in and do what kind of data gathering or data pushing you need to have. What I've done here is this is showing one of those ports, and it's showing the information on it. This is showing that full trace in text of the same information that's down here. So you can pull it back in as a text information as well if you have a way to parse it or deal with it. And it's actually showing out here what the end device is on this as well. What it's doing is it's searching where it starts, goes to the end, and identifies the end device on it. So it comes out as a single field automatically as well. Other things you can do with the system, and I'm going to cover real briefly before I get into what really matters, is if I'm on this device, let's go up one level, and I want to do work in the system but prevent people from doing things they're not supposed to, I can create a work order, and then when you do work in the system, it's the same way you function with the normal. Here, click on a port. Come on, nieces are not cooperating. Now as you do things with remote systems, come on. You think I never did this before. And then you can pick the cable you're going to be using. In this case, I'm going to do a patch cord. It has rules based to make sure that you're only doing LC connectors to LC. You can't put copper cables or anything else in it. So it really ties down the users to what they're doing. In this case, now you can see that this has a plus sign on it, meaning that this has a work order pending that has reserved that port in advance. Then you can send that ticket from that work order out to the field, and they can see what work they have assigned to them. And that workflow can actually be configured to what you need and to how you can notify people, send reports out as well. We have one client that they are using ServiceNow, and they have ServiceNow automatically create the work orders in Patch Manager, say, you got a design project to do. Here's all the actions you need to do. Feed that data back up as you move through the steps of the process, the master ticketing program, and when it finally hits completion, then it knows that it can move to its next step. So it takes the granularity out of the system that's really handling the overall and put it into the guys who are using the bottom end work, so to speak. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the REST API, just a little bit of it in here as well. And I've put a couple of simple calls together just to give you an idea. Here's the one I use to start. It just pulls out and shows the different resources that are available in the system. And basically, these are all the things, the different kinds of calls that you have, and it can handle anything for pulling data, updating data, modifying, etc., on any one of these types of fields. And if you go in and you want to get a cabinet, you can pull back the graphics so you can see the actual data. This is giving a front and rear view. You can bring it out in PNG, you can bring it out in SVG, you can even bring it out as HTML natively right out of the API. You see the different items over here, and you can do mobile cabinets as well. So you get a list of cabinets you want to see across the system. They're different ones. And then you have the ability to pull that same data, whether it's the trace information, that's that same report that I had, or you can get the graphics that you saw down below. Now, the reports work on something called data formats. And a data format is nothing more than a listing of all the fields you want to pull or push. And that same data format can be used directly in the API to pull the data out, or you can leverage a report. It really depends on how you want to go after that data and what you want to deal with it. But you have the exact report that I did on that other page, and you'll see the exact same headers just put into a JSON format that you can now parse and deal with however you want. This gives you the ability to take the data wherever and not have to try and figure out how to build a connectivity management system, because there are so many people out there that have some level of this data and think that you can get to this point. And this product handles the connectivity for you. You know, as Patch Manager says, you know, they do best of breed. They don't want to do polling of data. They don't want to really be your work order system of record. They want you to put the data into Patch Manager, be able to pull it out, push it in, and deal with it however. And we have probably a dozen clients in the US that are leveraging the API at a level that is interesting. The active data, you guys aren't doing it, but another client, they're actually pulling all the data from the switch ports and putting into Patch Manager the speed, status, probably half a dozen or so parameters on every switch port in their environment. Well, their environment's bigger than Bob's.
Are you generating work orders in Remedy for?
So not yet. That is an integration that we have planned. Part of our problem is, so the idea of the work order is to do something in advance, but physically do it. And as a lot of organizations have, you've got your engineers, your designers, and then you've got your gateway techs who actually put it in place. And there's always a dispute as to whether or not this is a documentation tool or a design tool. And so right now, the engineers believe this is a documentation tool in our organization. So they believe that it shouldn't be anything in there until the gateway techs put it in there. And so I'm trying to change minds. And when we do it, part of the process I want to do for an integration is, and some of the other presentations I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about what some of the stuff that I've pushed heavy in our stuff. But one of them is we've done a very heavy categorization of tasks at the task template level. And so we can tell when this task kicks off kind of what kind of a task it is. And we want to have a categorized task that says something about go build a design in Patch Manager, for example. At which point I want to automatically go kick off and start a work order, and then I'll have that work order ID tied to my change request ID per se over here with it. And in theory, when they get to a certain status as the status of the work order would change inside of Patch Manager, I want to get that information back with REST API calls. Say, give me info about this. And when it reaches a certain point in the process, you can define your process of the work order workflow inside Patch Manager. You get to that certain point, I want to now close that task automatically for it and move forward because we're done with the design. Let's move forward, kind of thing. And so part of it, he showed you reserving ports, but if you decide you want to put a new Cisco 3650 in the middle of that rack that he showed, wherever you had enough room for it, you pick the template on the side for the Cisco 3650 and you drag that template into this space, it reserves the rack space also. And so nobody can come along and stick another item in there. Now, physically, yeah, they can. So in the end, what you've got at the end of your process of your work order is your gateway tech has to confirm that what was designed is what was implemented, or move it around and make it what it really is. And then they close out their work order. That closing of that work order should trigger some workflow inside of Remedy as well. So it's an integration we have planned, but we got to change minds before we do the full integration.
Yeah. So the organization I was mentioning, they are not using the work order system either. They have about 7,000 cabinets of gear around the world. It's pure data centers, no office space, and they're monitoring every single port every night. And we've been told that at this point, the API is generating approximately 1 million to 1.5 million lines of updates in the system on a monthly basis because of the amount of data that they're updating across the world. So that's one area, and they do exactly as the company Bob's working with. They use it as a documentation tool. We have another organization, flip side. They have 57 people that are allowed to use Patch Manager. One of them is allowed to use Patch Manager without using that work order system. Everything that is done has to be recorded, has to go to a manager for review, costing, approval, and then they send it out in the field to get it done. That is, in the world, the perfect way you're supposed to be using this kind of system. And we rate our clients by, they get to a point of a scale of 1 to 5. Are they using both the work order system and the API? That gets them into that 5 classification. Most of our clients are hoping to get to 4, where they're not at that point. What I want to do is give you some of the slides and just some of the things that it shows better than my try to flip screens around. The reporting engine is built on searches and data formats and forms a report. Those data formats are completely extensible in almost any data field in Patch Manager to be pulled in those. You can create reports in a highly advanced where you can have one search and pull out multiple types of reports concurrently. Also can be pulled straight out as a JSON, or it can be pulled out as a CSV file, or nice PDF. You can run the reports, pull it out right out through the API, and then email it out using a different system. This is that equipment report that I showed. This is that port report that I showed. And then this is those work orders. You'll see on here, there's both a plus and a minus. A removing of a patch port is freeing up that port. So you can plan on having not just the standard Macs, but you get MAC-Bs available in the system as well.
How do you verify you had a minus on there? That means you got to remove it, right?
Correct.
So how do you verify that they removed it?
In the workflow process, there are all the steps. They go back to a QC step, and then somebody's supposed to verify it. That's either done through that logical query of the ports to make sure it's not got anything on it, or you send somebody else out to look at it, or you say they're good, and the next tech that goes out there starts screaming bloody murder because he's been given a port and he can't use it because somebody else is not there. Once you get everybody using the system, the one person that's not using the system correctly becomes chastised by all the rest of them.
Right.
Just jump to right here. This is the data formats and how they're structured. You can see them as just a set of fields on here, and that is exactly the format that comes out in JSON. And you'll see here is the exact results. You'll see them line by line on here, exactly the same as the data format.
How easy is it to add a custom field? If, let's say Bob says he wants to add 5 custom fields because his boss wants to see them.
And we did it.
6 minutes.
6 minutes.
And maybe another 8 minutes to add it to the report. It is truly, and I could show you in here, but literally you can go in and add a user attribute. You assign it to whatever, either total class of objects or just specific classes. So you can assign it to a patch panel. You can assign it to every piece of active chassis. You can assign it to ports. Those data fields are allowed to be anywhere, and they are text, integer, real numbers, pull down menus, a whole series of things that you can add to the system. And if you're even using pull down menus, those can be updated from the API and push additional values into it. So then you're not even having to go in and code the additional pick list remotely. You're just pushing it in from your integration.
So an example that we did on that was the company field, because we were doing multi-tenancy, and one of the companies doesn't want the other company. And I guess we're all still one big happy government organization, but it doesn't work that way sometimes. Didn't want the other company to be able to see their equipment. Well, at first they wanted us to put all that at the rack level and everything else. Well, you can't do that, because you can have some from this company in the rack and some from that company in the rack. And so what you need to be able to see from a company perspective, I may not can see your equipment, but I can see that you have something in that space in the rack, so that I don't try to reuse it. But we used the company field from our data from CMDB to push over to provide that multi-tenancy structure.
Basically what it was is that company field was identified back to the class of user, two class of users, a checkbox is on or off. So therefore, when the user logged in, they would see that space either as an active graphic with everything on it or gray box. It allowed them to know that there was something in that rack space, but they couldn't even tell the name of the device or what it was. So it truly gave them security within the rack level that a lot of these systems can't get. They can do it by the building or somewhere else.
Right.
And I will say that feature enhancement these guys pushed, and we swung a big stick and had it implemented in the product in a matter of about 2 months. It didn't exist when they had requested it.
So you're saying you could do multi-tenancy?
Yes. I can actually show you the other interface that I've logged in and show you what I've done.
Because it sounds like you're pulling all of the data out of the CMDB, and then they're only seeing what they're allowed to see.
Well, what we did to begin with is we knew we had data from the CMDB that needed to be put inside this system for documentation. So as we exported our data to put it over there to begin with, that was the key. We're throwing here all of the data that we know exists. Now you guys need to go put it in the racks and cable it, kind of stuff within the tool. From there forward, once everything was in place, now we're in that regular process, and I'm not doing any feeds from the CMDB at all.
Okay.
But we made it in the tool that if you're going to be in company B and put a new thing in there, you have to pick, hey, I'm company B, to make sure this equipment is done that way and does the multi-tenancy.
Okay. So when you look at these two sets of hierarchies, you'll see that over here we've got all of these regions, and over here I'm only seeing this one. Right. This is the multi-tenancy, and this is a user that has very limited rights, not only on a standpoint of what they can see, but what functionality they can have in the application. And this particular role, they can only do work of the work order. They can't make any changes to the data without activating a work order, which is a level above being able to view it and not, view only. But it does mean that if you put your power users in there, they can update the data, but somebody has to make sure that it's valid. And those workflows that are in here are highly configurable. Here's a simple one where, and what we do for most integrations, it's new, meaning it was generated by the master ticketing system. And then it goes into all the steps of a requester who puts in all their requests, designer goes down through all the processes. And as you work your way down, you'll see you've got accepted or rejected. You can also add scripts in here that are native to the system and be able to trigger automatically where you are in that phase. And it's just a matter of adding in a particular script to the system and adding it in here and execute a script. So that allows you to do it from right in here. And then you're dealing with a Python or whatever code that's sitting on the server itself. And it can be as complex as that, or it can be the one that I use when I am on a client site. I do this. I turn on the work order, and I'm demonstrating things. And that way, if I screw up, I can hit reject and everything goes back to the way it was. Because there was one day I was doing it live in a production system and wiped out 35 patches across an entire realm of connectivity and had to put it all back together. It took me 3 hours to undo the 3-minute mistake that I made.
Been there, done that.
So I like to make it Keith proof.
Okay.
Keith was a former employee of mine. So you can see the level of detail that you can get on here and the actions. The execute just commits them automatically. It wasn't your Keith.
I had my own Keith doing the same stuff.
Or Karen.
Everybody has one of those somewhere.
Okay.
Be careful, I'm married to Karen.
I have a sister named Karen.
Congratulations.
So what I wanted to do today was give you an overview of what you can see in the Patch Manager application. My demos will usually last between 10 minutes and about 4 hours of the level of information that's in here. There are other features that I've not even touched on, which are more automated tool sets in here. You can have it automatically find you all the patches between 2 ports. You can have it monitor for capacity and automatically notify you based on the data that's in here as to, am I over on? And we're working with his company to put power numbers in there to make sure that in the data center, they haven't zapped out their power strips.
So another piece that he's not covering in here, when you're in that work order system and you put that new device in the rack and you cable it up and all this kind of stuff, you can then turn around and tell it to generate the BOM of what you just put in there for you. And we are going to build an integration into that process. And that's part of our changing their minds to go that way. We have a set of custom pieces that we have in Remedy that goes as tracks part of their design process, and part of it is to build a bill of materials and build cost sheets and get approvals for the stuff to move forward for your design. And so I want them to start out designing here and pull that bill of materials over, because it will be way faster for them to build that over here than it will be to sit over here and punch the keyboard to put in all that equipment that they need to purchase. And I believe, Joel, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that if you sit in there and say, define your room and the room size, and you say this rack is sitting here and this rack is sitting here, and you put a cable from here to here, it'll even calculate for you the length of that cable. Is that correct?
It will if you've put in the raceway that you're going to be running it across,
Right.
and how your routing patterns will work.
Yep.
So
and that gives you a better detailed bill of materials to say how much cabling you're going to need to put this in.
yeah, it'll.
1 minute.
Oh, cool. Perfect. I'm done.
Well, if you want to continue, I mean, we do have a birds of a feather on Wednesday night. I mean, if you want to do a table discussion, we can do a table discussion on Patch Manager. Because I'm sure that you'll probably get people that didn't come in here that went next door or whatever. They would probably want to see more of it. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks, Joel.